Yeah.
There we go. It's 10 o'clock.
Well,
The floor is yours. I'll mute everyone, and you guys have the next half hour.
Cool. Well, thanks everybody for coming and showing up. We're really excited to show you all our research and everything that we put together.
yeah. Cool. So I guess I will share my screen.
We're going to start with just like bringing you guys through like our process and our research. And then we're going to, right towards the end, we're going to bring you through the actual deliverable right at the end.
Yep. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Awesome. So, Cody,
So our project is on the MIT Office of Publications. We aim to create a historical database focused on the work of MIT's acclaimed Office of Publications during its active years. Spearheaded by designers Jacqueline Casey, Ralph Coburn, and Dietmar Winkler, the office garnered praise from the design and scientific communities alike, pushing the boundaries of their medium and sparking the birth of the American Swiss international design movement.
Cool. So basically, we can just jump straight into our inspiration. So basically, during a lecture on design history in our sophomore year, Professor Liz Resnick introduced us to this amazing designer, Jacqueline Casey. She was an amazing Swiss-influenced designer that instantly caught like both of our eyes and stayed with us like all throughout college, like in our work and just our inspiration. Those were some of the posters that we like really enjoyed.
So Casey's place in design history. We wondered why we hadn't been taught more about Casey throughout college and why she wasn't more of a revered designer, especially as an early woman designer in a male-dominated field and a graduate of mass art. So when we were looking up for like why this was happening, Liz linked us with a bunch of great resources about Jacqueline Casey that she had known and also written herself. And we learned about her impact on the spread of American Swiss style in the States, but found resources on her and her work were really scarce and extremely hard to find and access. Actual published material on her, like the Red Book, came in extremely limited copies and were rare. So us knowing that MIT owned her work, we wondered why more hadn't been published on her.
Yeah, which basically jumped into intellectual property at MIT. So we know that students who created inventions while at MIT, inventions and intellectual property while at MIT, using MIT's resources, had partial ownership of their intellectual property along with the school in order for MIT to help with raising funds and helping with connections. So we wondered, was this the same for the staff at the Office of Publications and their work? We questioned why they were withholding the work of an influential artist like Casey and thought this was part of the reason that her legacy wasn't as well known as it should be within like the design community.
So this brought us to like the visual language of resistance. We wrongly anticipated that MIT was withholding Casey's work for their own gain, and we were trying to look into ways design has been implemented in the past into campaigns to spark a change. So we looked into the ways like the Women March used fashion and color to identify allies, and the way the Silence Equals Death campaign used graphic elements and shapes to identify their campaign.
Yeah. Basically, after this, I think it was like class, we jumped into our first interview with Jake Viola. So Jake was the owner of Arlington Press, which was the printer working. Sorry, Jake was the son of the owner of Arlington Press, who were the printers working firsthand with the office to print their work. So Jake and his dad worked firsthand with the designers at the office, and he outlined various printing processes like offset and split fountain printing, and made it very clear that they always tried to push the envelope of the technology. Jake always had to find solutions to the ideas that they tried to create, and with encouragements from our professor and mentor, Fitch McGill, we aim to push the boundaries of web technology and the way the office pushed the boundaries of print.
So we jumped into our interview with Gary Van Zant. Gary is like the curator and owner of the MIT Museum, and he's like an expert of the Office of Publications. And during our interview with him, he outlined the structure of the office and how it worked. And he made it really clear that the design coming from the office wasn't just the work of Casey's alone, but a combined effort of designers, of Jacqueline Casey, Ralph Coburn, and Dietmar Winkler, and the head of office / copywriter, John Mathill. We learned about the difficulties of getting the work published, like attribution confusion for who actually made the posters, because the designers and their work were so intertwined with each other that it was hard to distinguish whose work was whose. The posters were made as contracted work, so the contractors, not MIT, actually own the posters, although most of the contractors and companies are non-existent now. And the immense amount of process would take a long time to be archived properly. And Gary was the only person that stepped up to the plate, but still works full time. So we kind of switched from knowing that MIT wasn't withholding the work actually, and there was a bunch of like accumulative problems for the reasons it wasn't being published.
Yeah. So basically, when we went into MIT, the MIT Museum, to interview him, and basically he gave us like an all-access look to like. Basically, he allowed us to like interact, explore, and photograph the extensive collection of all of the archive process work of the office. Yeah, so this immense amount of files has never been digitally archived, and due to the sheer volume of the amount of work. Gary agreed to let us come back and scan the work at full resolution and publish it for an online archive celebrating it. We basically learned that MIT was not withholding it, and that we decided that we had to switch gears into creating an online collection of it.
So after that, we jumped into like the wireframing process. And at this point, we began loosely wireframing the pages and created a user flow for how people would move through the archive site. We wanted to target young designers and give them the feeling of discovery when moving through the work. So this is some of our early wireframes.
Yeah, so basically then COVID-19 hits like everyone in this thesis right now. And basically halted all of our plans for our scanning sessions at MIT. But however, we stayed optimistic as our process of archiving the work was already like pretty extensive. And we decided we could use objects like the Red Book, photos of the work we had already taken at MIT, and like different work that was sent to us to basically use it as a database for the website and just to continue all that other research when the COVID-19 blew over.
So that's when we started jumping into designing. So with the idea of breathing new life into the posters and pushing web in the way the office push printing, we created a 3D version of one of Jackie's most eye-catching posters and one of our favorite posters. This eventually became our landing page. We use this as a way to call back to one of her most famous posters and also to just bridge the old and the new. And we thought it was just a really eye-catching way to open the website. So these are some more of our refined pages before we jumped into developing.
Yep, so basically after this, we jumped into an interview with Dietmar Winkler, one of the original designers of the office, and the owner, not the owner, but the person who holds his collection, Megan Verkogo. So basically, we got a first-hand account of the ins and outs of the office from Dietmar's perspective and learned about the importance of the other members of the office and faculty that weren't designers, namely like John Mattil, who started the office and whose early visions helped shape MIT's identity as a whole. Megan and Dietmar were like incredibly helpful and gave us an archive of some of Dietmar's work from the office and a detailed like written summary of his recollection of the time that was spent there, which like helped create like a huge section of our website. So then we jumped into development.
So at this point, we had never developed a website before. So we really had to grind, and we stayed up like countless nights watching Webflow, JavaScript, CSS, and HTML tutorials. And we also got extensive help from our web professor and friend, Saul Baseman. Shout out to Saul.
Yeah. So basically we had to like jump in and like edit posters too. Yeah. So then after that, we didn't get too into user testing, but we wanted to get some feedback from some like experienced designers. So we basically hit up John Keogh. I don't know if any of you guys know him, but he's a designer at Upstatement, and he used us at our website at its almost like close to final stage and gave us like really like structured feedback and critique that helped us like push it. Yeah. So that led us into our final website. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, like I said about the landing page, Fish really really pushed us to develop something that would create an impact upon first visit, just like the designers had done in the Office of Publications. So we decided that this 3D model of the Jacqueline Casey poster would be a great fit. It stands as like a monument that sparked our interest in the office and thought it would feel right to create the impact Fish was talking about.
Yep. And
so you click enter.
Yep. So basically, one of the first decisions we made was that we wanted to utilize a 3D gallery to create a feeling of discovery and kind of replicate that feeling of walking through a physical space in a digital environment. So all of these first posters were catalogs that Gary like showed us that were from summer sessions at MIT. Some of these have gone unreleased, and so we really wanted to publish them. These next few posters here are all posters that Megan and Dietmar sent us, which were incredibly helpful because they're just like awesome posters.
Yeah, one of the like most extensive parts of this actually was getting all the posters that we had and retouching them in Photoshop and trying to like brighten their colors and bring them back to life to what their original like print quality was. So that and also just like working with the file sizes to make the web page responsive enough. So I mean, Christian worked so many hours on this part of the website. So
yeah. So basically all these also link to process pages. We're gonna start with body language. Yeah, so within the process page, we decided to do a zoom hover of the function to showcase like the print details of each of the posters, because like again, the one envelope that the office was really trying to was print technology at the time. So we decided like a hover zoom, we could do that.
yeah, and this overview section kind of just like went over like the different parts of the poster. That was like the very overview part, like the title and like the dates. So this process section is basically like a photo gallery of the different process work that they had worked on prior to the final development of the poster. This is all Jacqueline Casey's process work for body language. All this stuff is unreleased and like not published anywhere. So we were able to take these pictures and put them on the site. So hopefully we can go back and actually get very high res scans. These are still photographs from the first visit we actually went to MIT, but we hope to go back in the future and get the whole process work of the entire archive.
Yeah. The Slack section right here, we basically wanted to utilize an interactive slider to kind of like educate the user on like the printing process of the poster. Yeah. So basically,
this one was done with offset printing. This was like on a black piece of paper and done with like white ink on offset printer. It's one of the more simpler prints. But we also wanted to showcase some split fountain ones once we go back and actually like get more archived material.
Yep. And this basically leads into our historical timeline.
Cool. So we're going to go through the history of the Office of Publications now. So John Mattill started the office in 1951. John Mattill was an early visionary for bringing a modern approach to MIT's campus graphics and visual identity. A wordsmith, as he was known, writer and editor. He is also credited for transforming MIT's technology review from an alumni magazine into a robust, inspiring, and well-copied magazine about tech and its implications in the real world. His modernist approach to graphic solutions would set the stage for the evolution and growth of the Office of Publications. This is just a quote from him. Our search for new knowledge at MIT implies the highest creativity, and we seek to stimulate our students' imaginations. So our college publications, too, must show creativity and imagination.
Basically, after he started the office, he hired Muriel Cooper under the referral of MIT resident designer Georgie Capes. So with her hiring, MIT became one of the first universities to prioritize its publications by hiring a full-time graphic designer. And then later, in 1955, due to an increased workload by the university, Cooper hired her former classmate at Mass Art, Jacqueline Casey. Jacqueline Casey was a skilled illustrator who studied fashion design at Mass Art, but was seeking a greater challenge in the arts. Graphic design was the exact challenge she was searching for, and accepted the offer as Cooper's design assistant in the office in 1955.
Cool. So in 1957, Muriel Cooper left the office to begin a brief Fulbright fellowship in Milan, studying graphic design and exhibition design. In her absence, former MIT architect student Ralph Coburn was hired. Also a fine painter, Coburn used his combined skill set to translate geometric abstract compositions for the office and the university's campus graphics.
Yeah. So basically, in 1958, John Mattill decided that the office could take in designers from Europe. So yeah, so the summer sessions, as they would come to be known, would invite European artists and designers into MIT in order to help with the extra workload of campus announcements and pamphlet graphics. So basically, the decision was beneficial to everyone involved, with European designers getting extra work and a chance to visit the States while getting paid, and the office staff learning and gaining experience alongside them. The sessions had an extremely open and collaborative environment that not only gave the people involved exposure to the art and design of those from around the world, but also greatly influenced the style within the office and MIT permanently. This is a quote from Jackie Casey. In my early days at MIT, a designer working on summer session materials would interview faculty and have a mini course in a subject such as radioisotopes from the professor in charge. There was an opportunity to learn something new every day.
So in 1959, we're going to start talking about Theresa Moll. Theresa Moll studied graphic design in Basel, Switzerland before becoming an assistant at Studio Bulgari in Milan. She returned to Switzerland in the mid-1950s, first working with Karl Gerstner's studio and eventually at Gigi. Through Karl Gerstner, she was introduced to John Mattel and hired as a designer for the Office of Publications in the summer sessions in 1958.
So basically, Moll came with impeccable Swiss training with two of the great Swiss designers as her teachers, Armin Hoffman and Emil Reuter. She was credited by Jacqueline Casey with introducing the grid and its design philosophy, as well as to European typography in the office. In our interview with Office of Publications designer Timar Winkler, he stated that Moll was the office's unofficial typography teacher. And this is a quote from Jackie Casey. She introduced the office to European typography. She had been well trained in the design of modular systems. This use of proportions in designing publications series became a useful tool for developing MIT's image.
Cool. Yeah. So in 1965, the office's style had greatly evolved under the influence of Theresa Moll. And with the addition of young German designer Dimar Winkler, the office was able to cut costs and have the benefits of an in-house renderer. Winkler was trained as a typographer and technical printer in the revered school of Kuschel Amsterdam in Hamburg, Germany.
Yep. And then basically they kept him designing, and in 1982, MIT earned their second annual Design Leadership Award from the AIGA for its outstanding demonstration of an institutional commitment to design over a substantial period of time in a variety of media. The award twice mentions the MIT style, which became the recognizable look of MIT developed and evolved from the groundworks laid Mattel, Moll, Cooper, Casey, Coburn, and Winkler. The office set standards for institutions all over America, thus spreading the Swiss-influenced aesthetics brought from Europe during Mattel's summer sessions, sparking a westernized version of the beloved international style.
So over the years, the different administration had moved in and out of MIT. Budget cuts gave the designers in the office less and less freedom, and the work began to dwindle down. Winkler left the office after a short time in the 70s. Casey remained at Design Services until her retirement in 1989, and she briefly worked in the MIT Media Lab until her death in 1992. Coburn worked at MIT until his retirement in 1988, and Cooper moved on to become the founder of the MIT's Visual Language Workshop and later becoming a co-founder of the MIT Media Lab.
And that wraps up the website.
That wraps up the entire website, yeah. And our presentation at that, too. We do have a section for bios that we still want to build out too, but we wanted to wait until we had like more archived information and more stuff from like more personal stuff from the actual designers so that we could build that out.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Are you okay if I unmute people for feedback?
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Yeah.
Yo, congratulations, guys. This is really amazing.
Thanks, bro. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey,
Yeah.
Cody and Christian. I really like the direction that your project took because it was limited the amount of the real information about Jacqueline Casey, and the fact that I don't actually agree with Gary Van Zanti that process work was fabulous, and I'm really pleased that he allowed you to photograph some of it. So I love the idea of you building out a website, and I like the beginning, which seems to be very interactive. But one thing that I think you need to consider as you move forward, and maybe Saul will agree or disagree with this, but in the actual pages, you look like print designers in a website. So I think you have to be much more interactive. Nobody's going to read that tiny little type that's dropped out of black. You know that. Too much type. It would be great if you really build out the interactivity and deal with go with a select amount of material that you can make interactive. And then if your interest still exists, then you can build it out even more. I think a website on this material, including Ralph Coburn, who was an amazing designer, and of course Dietmar Winkler, who was their work needs to be absolutely shown. And so the process work in this is completely valuable. But here's the thing, guys, you can't print this in a publication without getting permission from MIT. So it'll be very interesting to find out whether you can even publish this website to a larger audience. All print on her and
What's happening?
50 of her posters, and that's what's actually, and I allow them to be printed because MassArt owns them. So yes, do keep that into consideration about publishing the website, finding out about it. Okay.
Yeah,
100%.
thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in, Liz, and thank you again for all the help on all this stuff too.
Yeah, was helped to guide our research like so much.
Yeah, literally was the base foundation of this entire project. So thank you again.
This information in a fun way, accessible to all the people who want to learn more about it, who don't have access to the publications in which this material has been printed, because for the most part, most of them, like design issues for the big essay that Robert Wiesenberger and I wrote on the history, that's got a paywall. So you have to pay to actually get that PDF that I shared with you. So that limits access. There's a lot of that going around